rotation is happening in a little bit over a week with the release of Edge of Eternity, and I wanted to make a quick video to discuss mana bases for Standard moving forward. The lands that we have coming in from Edge of Eternity are kind of a weird combination. We have 2 allied color in blue-black and red-green, and we have 3 enemy colored in black-white, red-white, and green-blue. So the allied color that are missing is going to be green-white, which is definitely important to note, blue-white, and then red-black. So it's especially important for the allied ones that are missing. I'll get into that later. Bear with me. And then for the enemy colored ones that are missing, we have black-green and blue-red. So just wanted to have this as sort of the baseline for the video. I want everyone to understand these are the lands coming in. That's sort of going to affect everything else we're going to talk about with the mana base. Next, I'm going to go over to Magic Online, and that should help just sort of display, move things around, and explain what's going out and what I think you should do using these shock lands moving forward. So first things first, we can get this out of the way. All of the Painlands are rotating. We have a full cycle of all the allied and enemy Painlands. They're rotating from the format, meaning every color combination is losing an equal amount of things. Not too much to discuss here. Obviously, the Painlands are relatively good, but they're going to be gone. So remember that. Keep that in mind. So next up, and this is where things start getting important to note what's coming in and what is coming out. But we have the enemy fast lands from OTJ. They're going to stay. They're not rotating. But the Phyrexia all will be 1 fast lands, which are the allied colored ones, are going to be rotating. So again, that's going to be red-green, black-red, blue-black, green-white, and white-blue. So fast lands are very powerful if you want to play 1-drops. Pretty straightforward concept. But something that's really important to note and to understand is that some of these allied colored combinations are losing lands and they're not getting any new ones. So while in the case of Painlands everything's symmetrical, it's not symmetrical in the case of the fast lands that are coming in and that are leaving. So for example, we have Blackleaf Cliffs, which is a red-black land that is leaving, and we don't have anything coming in to replace it. The same is true for Razorverge Thicket, and the same is true for Seagram Coast. So that's gonna really affect 2-color decks, also somewhat 3-color decks, depending on what you're trying to accomplish and what you're trying to do. But this is something that's worth noting and remembering going forward. If you've been playing like Green-White Gear Hulk, your mana base is gonna take a loss, so you need to consider how you build your deck. Maybe it's going to be harder to play Llanowar Elf. A lot of that is going to depend on what verges you want to play with. We'll get into all of that later. But this is really important to note. So in the case of Copperline Gorge, that's getting replaced by Stomping Ground. And in the case of Dark Slick Shore, that is getting replaced by Watery Grave. So these are getting replacements, these 2, and then these 3 are not. Next up, I want to take some time to quickly go over the Restless Lands. These are all relatively powerful. A reminder that they exist. They're worth considering. They're worth playing. But in the context of 3-color decks, you might... It depends, right? Like, you can play a small number of these, even if you're playing a 3-color deck. But one concept that I'm going to go over later is how shock lands combined with surveil lands are going to work with verges, and how you can combine all these cards to have really powerful 3-color mana bases going forward. So I think these are probably going to be things that you mostly want in your 2-color decks, maybe decks that don't mind playing a tap land on turn 1. Remember, these exist. You should probably be playing them some percentage of the time, but tap lands obviously aren't great, again, if you are trying to cast 1-drops and things like that. But these lands are great. Remember, they exist. Definitely consider putting them into your mana bases. Next, I want to talk about specifically the shock lands that are not being printed in the set. I don't know when these are going to be printed. I don't know how long it's going to take for them to complete the cycle. They probably will at some point. But I want to talk about the shock lands that are not in the set, and then the surveil lands that sort of correspond with the Shockland. And the reason that's important is for Verges, right? If you want to build a 24 land mana base for a 3-color deck, you can pretty straightforwardly just include 12 Shocks/Surveil lands and then 12 Verges. Depending on your deck and the spells you want to cast, obviously you can change some of the numbers. But I think it's important to note that these Surveil lands are kind of above the rest because they can fill the slot of enabling Verges due to the fact that these Shock lands don't exist. So the Surveil lands I wanted to highlight are Lush Portico, Underground Mortuary, Rackus Theater, Meticulous Archive, and Thundering Falls. So if you want to play 3-color decks, if maybe you're looking at things like Tarkir cards, whatever it is, things like Jeskai Control, for example, keep in mind these Surveil lands, I think, sort of stand out. If you're maybe buying cards for future Standard, I think these are ones to consider picking up because they might go up due to the fact that they fulfill this role of being dual lands that can enable Verges for 3-color mana bases. So that's important. Next up, I think I have all of the foundational points laid out. The last thing I want to talk about is Verges and things of the like. So almost there. So the rest is really up to you to figure out how you want to build your deck and your mana base. I think these core concepts will be helpful to understand moving forward. I think these are the best lands. Obviously, the Shock lands are great. The Fast lands are great. And then the Surveil lands can sort of supplement the ones that are missing. But yeah, for example, if I wanted to build a Mardu deck, I'll pull out the lands that I would consider playing. So we've got our Mardu Verges, we've got our Fast lands in Mardu, and then we have our Shock lands in Mardu. So sort of weighted towards the enemy colored, where I only have 1 red-black dual land, and then I have 3 red-white dual lands and 3 black-white dual lands. So things like these are important to note. The other thing I think that's important to note is what your Verges make on turn 1. So I have a lot of black mana on turn 1, and I have some extra white mana on turn 1 if I start with a hand that's like 3 Verges, for example. So that's something to consider, as well as I just have a bunch of white sources here. So if I'm going to play a Mardu deck, I probably want to be black-white base. It might be difficult to consistently have red mana on turn 1. I'm only going to have 8 duels here. As well as just considering how you want to build your mana base, right? You're probably only going to play 22 to 24 lands, depending. And if I max out on all these, including the Surveil land, this is going to be 24 here. And that will give me an equal amount of mana in all my colors. So I'm going to get 16 black, 16 white, 16 red, assuming I didn't mess that up. If I did, fix it in your head. But you get the concept. And then, yeah, you could play Starting Town. Maybe I don't want the Theater. Maybe I think that 2 duels is enough because my mana base is heavily black. And it's fine if I just have only black mana for the first few turns. So I can supplement that with Starting Town if I want. But yeah, I think one of the most important things to note when building 3-color mana bases, especially for more aggressive decks, is what your Verges are going to produce on turn 1. So again, just if I'm going to build a Mardu deck, maybe I'm going to consider cutting my red 1-drops, even if they're better than some of my other colors, because it's going to be that much harder for me to cast them as reliably. The other thing to note is for the Khans color combinations, when it comes to allied or enemy colored things, like specifically in the Fast lands, you're going to get 2. So Mardu's going to get 2. But for example, if you're in a Shard color combination, meaning like Bant, you're only going to get 1. So I don't have a blue-white Fast land, and I don't have a green-white Fast land. So in terms of 3-color decks that want to maybe cast a different 1-drop, could be potentially difficult. And then understanding the symmetry, or understanding how the Shock lands work, I guess is a little bit more complicated because there's just sort of random ones that show up. For example, if I want to play Naya, I get 2. If I want to play Bant, I get 1. So you kind of just have to check that for yourself depending on the different color combinations you want to play. So yeah, the mana bases are weird. Obviously rotation hasn't happened yet. I'm not 100% certain how I'm going to build every single mana base. All decks are different. All curves are different. The color requirements obviously are different. But I hope that laying this sort of out for you helps make decisions in deck building in the future, and just also for people that don't know what's actually rotating, what's coming in, all that stuff. I hope that this helps for that. Are there any other things I want to go over before we call it? I guess the villages are not all created equal. I think the standout ones are sort of the Mardu ones. The blue one can be good if you're playing a combo deck. But I don't need to spend too much time talking about these. And again, I think the most important thing, once you have all the lands memorized, once you know the shock lands that are coming in and the fast lands that are staying, is just understanding how to build your mana bases with verges and just checking what colors your verges make on turn 1. So I don't actually know if there's consistency to how these verges work. There probably is, but I always just have to look. It's hard for me to remember. I like these ones, for example, I kind of have memorized because for the Thoughtseize formats, having black on turn 1 is really important. Obviously, Standard does not have Thoughtseize, but I hope this was helpful. I hope it explained things. I haven't been playing much. I've kind of just been waiting for rotation, so I figured I would make a quick video, see if people like it. Hope that it helps. And yeah, if you guys stuck with it, feel free to like and subscribe. Give me feedback. Hopefully I didn't miss too many important concepts for the mana bases. But anyway, thank you for watching. Good luck with rotation, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.